This is ZEISS Presents Full Exposure, the weekly resource for news, trends, and the people who influence the world of photography and cinematography. Hosted by veteran photographer and filmmaker Jim Camp.
Minnesota native now based in New York, Sinjun Strom is a photographer and visual artist who doesn't just take portraits, she makes them. Her ideas take root in detailed journals she keeps, mapping out possible subjects and sets for her elaborately produced images, having her hands on almost every aspect of her photographs. From the clothes to the sets, she even handcrafts wallpaper backgrounds and props, creating an almost cinematic style. She recently finished at the School of Visual Arts in New York, exclusively learning film formats, from 35mm to large format view cameras. Our special thanks to recent Full Exposure guest Andrew French for lending his Manhattan studio for the interview, and emerging filmmakers Chen and Hilary Safadi of RealWorks Filmmaking Education Program in Brooklyn, who shot and recorded this episode. Synjihn, it's really great to meet you and sit down and talk to you in the studio here in New York.
I'm so excited.
You got such a cool background.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little. Talk to me a little bit about. Well, I mean, I first heard of you through the New York Times 12 Emerging Photographers story. So tell me a little about how that came about, and and then we get into your education and stuff.
Yeah. I applied to go to the New York Times Portfolio Review Day, and I kind of applied on a whim because so many people apply to it, and I just wasn't really sure how that was gonna go. But I ended up getting in, which was really cool, and I met a lot of really wonderful people there, and then good things just started coming from that. They asked me to be in Photoville, and then that article came out on the Lens blog, and then more people started approaching me after that, which was really cool. Yeah.
So, so is the Times article came out right after Photoville?
It came, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what was the result of that?
If more articles came, I got approached about more work that's photo related because I've been working in production. So that's good, but I've kind of had to push everything back because I was traveling for 6 months, and I had to be really firm about the fact that I wanted to travel, and I needed to take time for myself for a little bit before I get into work.
This is after you graduated? Yeah,
well, I took a year and worked after I graduated. I freelanced, and then I realized that I was getting so caught up in work that if I didn't leave now and travel, that I was just going to get stuck in it. So. Yeah,
and you went to the School of Visual Arts here in New York?
Yes, for the second half of college.
For the second half,
yeah. The first half was at the Kansas City Art Institute.
Yeah, we've all done that.
Yeah.
we've all moved around.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I went to.
Because it's a learning process. You don't know how it's going to be until you get there.
Right,
so.
Right.
Yeah.
So what did you? I mean, we have pictures of your senior thesis.
Yeah.
Which are pretty cool. But there's more to it than just the pictures. I mean, there's the whole background of your design and your concepts and everything. So tell us a little bit about how you kind of get these ideas for these really elaborate set pieces.
Yeah, this series, it took me a whole year to create because it was so much work, but prior to that I'd been planning it for 2 years and just thinking about it, and I keep a lot of journals, so I just kind of wrote down every thought I had for like the 2 years prior to working on it, and I realized after I made them that a lot of the concepts for each image came from experiences that I've had, just things that have stuck with me. Like I had a step-grandma whose whole house is full of fake plants, which she liked because she didn't have to really take care of them, but she liked having plants in her house, and I always thought that was like a really cute quality about her. I just loved that she had like a house full of fake plants, and that moved into another photo I made that was just full of them. I'm trying to think of what the other concepts came from. It's just like a lot of weird childhood experiences I had that really stuck with me, just things I noticed about other people that I wanted to bring out into photographs.
Tell us about how you say you journal, you do a lot of journaling, you write all this down, you make drawings and stuff.
Yeah.
What inspiration do you get? Because the colors are really phenomenal. And
Yeah.
you know, I think what somebody might think when they first look at them is, oh, you went out and you bought this and you bought that, but that's not the case, right?
I think
you make a lot of stuff.
In this case, every project is different, but I think in this case, I was finding dresses that I liked, and then I was adjusting them to what I needed, but I would kind of start with the pattern and the colors of the dress and then move outward into designing everything else. So
cool.
then I moved into designing the wallpapers, and then once I made the wallpapers, I started designing the furniture and like...
So you literally made the wallpaper.
Yeah, I designed it and printed it out. Because I'm really particular, I want to control everything, so... If I wanted it to look how I wanted it to look, it doesn't exist.
That sounds like somebody that, you know, is doing their apartment and say, well, start with the rug and then, you know, design it from that. You start with the dress.
I can't wait to make my own house. I'm so excited. I already have plans for that. So
let's just finish with your thesis project. So did you plan, because you have quite a few images with that, did you plan each one as an individual person? How did you find the people?
That was hard.
What was the kind of concept behind it? Just the house you were talking about where they had the fake plants and you just sort of riffed on it from there?
It was difficult because I started working with family members that I cared about who I wanted to be in my thesis. So I started with them and worked with them. And then like I even went to England for my Christmas break to visit family there with my parents, and I photographed my 2 aunts there because they're very close in age and they're the sweetest people and they were perfect to photograph. But once I made my way through my family members, then trying to find other people for the series was really hard because I wanted to make an effort. If I was going to make these photos, they needed to be right, and I wanted to make sure that I was including a wide range of people and that I wasn't just staying on one demographic, because in New York it seems like a lot of the eccentric older women are like old white ladies on the Upper West Side, and a lot of people were recommending those kinds of people to me, which is fine. It's like okay to have a couple, but again, I wanted to make sure I was being inclusive because it's something I've been aware of since I was younger when I was looking at photos, like what I wanted to be seeing in them. So it's just like something I'm being aware of, but in school it was hard because you have deadlines and you're trying to get the photos done by certain deadlines. Right. And my classmates were getting really frustrated with me because I kept pushing it back and pushing it back. I was like, I need the right women. I can't sacrifice the integrity of the project just because of a timeline. So I had a lot of arguments with my classmates about that, but I got it done.
Yeah, you did. And was that the most challenging thing? Was the casting?
That was really hard.
Yeah.
Because also I was working with women who were over 60. Some of the women I worked with were in their 80s, so they have really weird schedules. Sometimes we'd have to reschedule because they're sick or they have to go to the hospital or they're just feeling tired that day. And when you're working with another person's schedule, like of course I have to be, like I can't complain about it. I just have to be patient, and that's really hard when you're on a timeline.
Where did you set everything up? I mean, obviously, did you do a studio at school, or
no? I only did one studio session because it was convenient for her. But most of them, I would either have to go to their house because some people aren't as mobile. It just depended on the person, like working with what their needs were. So if I needed to go to their house, I would, or like. One location, I was looking for a very specific type of window. So I went to a woman's apartment because she had the window I was looking for. And it had to be on a certain level so I could have someone coming through the window. It was like a very particular situation. Yeah. But most of the time I was going into their homes, or I built one in my kitchen because it was the only space I had.
With the pink lampshade.
Yeah, I had to make a bedroom in there.
You made the pink
I took everything out of the kitchen. I had to apologize to my roommates. I was like, I'm sorry, I have to take over for a whole day. I have to make this room. It was, that was the hardest one.
Now, I think we should also say that you're a young photographer who shoots with film.
Yeah.
Let's go back. Let's maybe go back in time a little bit, and how did you get bitten by wanting to just delve into photography, and then advanced to stay in film and not digital?
Yeah. Well, like I grew up in a very creative household and I was encouraged to make things. And I started out drawing when I was a kid and I got really good at that. But I was also like a very, what's the word?
Rebellious?
Oh my gosh,
What
no,
are you
not
looking-
even. I was very practical.
Oh,
so I was
really?
worried about just like how I would make money when I was older. Even as a kid,
Wow.
I was like thinking about that. So I liked drawing a lot, but I didn't realistically see how it was going to help me in the future. And then when I was like in about 6th grade, I started biking to antique stores in my free time. I like biked a lot. And I started getting to know the women who ran the shops, and they started giving me discounts, and I started collecting antiques. And I really enjoyed talking to them, but I also enjoyed like collecting all of these items, and I felt a need to preserve the really good ones. And that's where like my love for vintage clothes started, but also I started collecting photographs because they would have bins of this stuff, and sometimes you could track them where you could find someone's whole album if you like dug hard enough, and I would try and preserve them.
They're like little time machines.
Yeah, and I felt bad that they were like sitting in these bins, so I wanted to save them, but then I didn't understand how they were made at first. I was just interested in how they looked, and the more I collected them, I noticed that they started to have different qualities, and that depending on when they were made, they had these different looks to them, and I was really curious about that because I was always interested in how things were made. And I talked to my uncle, who was a photographer at the time, and we had conversations about it, and I had never been interested in photography because it didn't seem very hands-on to me, and that's what interests me most when I make work. But when we talked about it, it just seemed like when he started talking about film, it seemed like something I could really get into because there is a whole process to it, and you are using your brain, and you're like learning. It just seemed like a whole new skill set that I would be interested in taking on. So I started like researching 35mm cameras on eBay because in Minnesota it was like hard to find that stuff at the time. And once I finally found a Pentax that I was looking for, people kept overbidding me.
Why the Pentax?
I don't remember that part. I remember I researched a lot, and for some reason I decided on that one. I have no idea why though. But then I was talking to my dad about it, and I was really frustrated. I was like, all these adults are overbidding me on eBay, and I just want this Pentax, and I was so frustrated. And he was like, you said a Pentax? I was like, yeah. He was like, I have one of those in the basement, and I've had it since forever, but I'm not using it anymore, and you could totally have it. And he had it since he was 16, and I was 13 at the time, so it felt so special. And I still use that camera, like every day. I always have it with me. And so then I started shooting, and the light meter was broken, so it was really frustrating at first because I couldn't afford a light meter, or I couldn't afford to fix it, so I just kept a notebook of like what my exposures were, and then I like evaluated the prints I got, and I had to learn that way.
Oh my.
Yeah, which sounds ridiculous now, but that's how I had to learn.
But it sounds how driven you were to
I was
master
so
it.
excited about it. Once I got my first prints back, I was like, I'm in love. I love this. I need to spend all my money on this. So I started doing more chores, and I was biking super far to the one processor I could go to. And I would wait for my prints and get some ice cream while I waited, but that was like my routine every week, is like chores, film, chores, film. And I just like, I was hooked on that, and I'm still using it.
So did you get to work in a darkroom?
I didn't get to use
I mean, that's like it's in
darkroom.
college. Did you get to do that in college?
I actually got to do it once in high school because there was a gallery that's closed now, but they were doing really good things when I was in high school, and they created this program. They got funding for it where anyone can be a part of it, and it's free. You just have to apply, and they choose like 5 people, and then they have unlimited film. They had cameras you could try. They had a Rolleiflex, which is when I got hooked on the Rolleiflex too.
When did you start using the Rollie?
Only recently,
Wow.
because that was, I waited until I could get one for the right price. And that one was given to me actually, which is really cool. I just had to pay to get the shutter fixed, but I got it for a steal. But yeah, this program let us use a darkroom. They let us shoot film all for free, and that was my first time printing, which was really cool. Yeah.
Wow, that must have been really something going from 35 to 2 1/4.
I was
with the
so
Rolly, right?
excited.
Yeah.
I was so hyped. That just made it worse. I was just like, I need to do this forever.
Are you shooting in, actually, I mean, obviously what you do, it's crying for color. Do you shoot any black and white? Or?
I started with black and white, and when I was a kid, I was like, black and white forever. I'm gonna shoot this till I die. And then once I got into color, it was a wrap. I love black and white, and sometimes I feel a need for it, but most of the time, it's gonna be color. Yeah.
Wow. That's I'm still thinking about how you learned about exposure just without a meter. That's really something.
It really helped me because now I don't necessarily need a meter to shoot. Like when I'm shooting 35, when I'm just out and about, like it's so natural at this point. I can just switch things whenever I need it. And
yeah, you can look and see what it is outside and see like in here it's going to be f2 at 125 at 400 or something. Yeah.
I'm so thankful that I learned that.
And you know, and it's funny, you know, we talked to somebody, you know, who's older like me, and he's totally digital now, and he was saying that, you know, because I think it really helps to learn film. Yeah. But he said, nah, you know, he said no, digital. He doesn't think, you know, the young people coming up today, they don't need to know about film. I mean,
no.
Well, you know, I mean, I disagreed a little bit, but I saw.
I disagree.
Well, you know, I mean, he shoots for, you know, big clients, and you know, and doesn't have to worry about the time to process and all that kind of stuff. You know, so that's his point of view. But for the art of it, you know, the pure aesthetics.
It's not even just the art. It's just knowing what you're doing. I have been TAing and I've been teaching my own courses, and I do like to start with film, or I try to get if we are shooting digitally, I try to get them to use their brain and to think about what they're doing, because sometimes when you're learning digitally, you do pick up bad habits and you're relying on the camera and you're not learning, and you're not going to understand light in the same way if you're not actually thinking about it. So that kind of drives me insane sometimes. I get a little serious about it, but it just like there are situations that stick out to me where there was one time when I was teaching where a girl she had the camera tethered to the screen, and when she took the photo, she went over and started cropping it immediately, and I was like, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I don't like it, I'm gonna crop it. And I was like, your camera is still set up, everything is right there. It was like, what do you want from the photo? And she's like, well, I want to get closer. It's like, move the camera or change your lens. Right. It is right here. And it's sometimes there are just those habits that they pick up and they get a little lazy, and that drives me nuts.
Yeah. That's what a lot of teachers do, I think, say is, you know, try to tell students is to, you know, if you don't like the way something looks, move your feet.
Exactly. You
know, or move closer, or what were you teaching? What ages and?
I've been TAing at SVA just because that's a nice transition, and I know the place very well. But I've been helping with some digital lighting courses, and then I've also been TAing for my friend Claire. We did some experimental video classes for pre-college, and then beyond that, I've been creating my own courses at like last stop high schools. And with youth clubs too. I've been doing like set design classes, showing them how to create situations for like either no money or very cheap, just kind of using your resources, and then also doing basic film classes with kids, which is really cool.
Wow, how do you get into these programs that you've gotten into, helping kids with all that kind of stuff?
A lot of people have been reaching out to me, asking me to, which is cool, because I've had people interning with me, and I've been teaching people one-on-one, and that's just been something I've been enjoying. And so then people saw that and started reaching out to me, which is awesome, and I'm like very thankful that I get to do that. But because of the power of the internet, I was able to post about them and get cameras donated and film and money donated just from people on Instagram, which is crazy. Like I had random people mailing me 35mm cameras.
How do they get in touch with you? Basically like through Instagram and stuff? That thing? Yeah.
Which is crazy.
That thing? That thing Instagram? Yeah.
That weird thing. I have mixed feelings about it.
Yeah, tell me.
I hate like spending all this time on my photos and like doing everything in a manual way, scanning everything, and then putting this small thing on the internet. It's kind of like defeats the purpose, but at the same time, like, I need it to get work right now. It's very helpful for that, so I have to do that.
So the trip you took when you went on the road for a while and you went to all different places, you made some pretty cool pictures along the way.
I was gone for 6 months, and I just got back 2 days ago, which is crazy.
Did you know where you were going and then think, well, I want to look for this, to do this kind of idea here, or did the wherever you went, the environment influenced you?
So normally when I work here, I'm like I said earlier, I'm a control freak. I like to plan everything. I'm very serious about how I want everything to look. And I kind of, this past year, remembered like the time that I was happiest was when I was a kid, just like playing around and trying things. And I thought it would be nice to force myself to let loose a little bit as soon as I started traveling, and just like only bring a few outfits with me, but either find outfits while I'm there or get inspired by the environments I'm in, just kind of let things happen based off of where I was at. So every place I went, I would shop most of the time, and then I would hang out with the people I was hanging out with, experience where I was, and then by the end of the trip I would take a few photos based off of like what I had absorbed.
Well, one in particular that jumps out, when I first saw the photograph from Alaska, I said, all right, well, I don't know, wherever that is, that has to be photoshopped. But then I read, well, no, you're doing film, so you're not really into that, right? So how did you happen on that particular place and what you're wearing and so on?
I know. Well, I was posting that I was going to be traveling, and I had all these people reach out to me like, come stay with me here, come stay with me at this place. And I grew up in Minnesota, and I did spend a lot of time outdoors, but I also had friends who like kind of took that further and moved to other places like Alaska. And some kids that I went to high school with are now working as nature guides. They work in the helicopters there, or just restaurants because they like hiking in the area. So one of my friends reached out to me and said I could come and stay with him, and since he does work as a nature guide and it is his job to bring people to the glacier, he could bring me for free. Just as a friend, we would just go on a hike together.
And that's what we see. We see you on a glacier. Wearing.
It was so crazy because he's one of my good friends from high school, and he was totally messing with us the whole time, like, oh, it's such a chill hike out to the glacier, it's not a big deal. So I had all my gear with me and stuff, and this chill hike in a mossy wooded area slowly turned into like some rocky areas, and then some full-on bluffs that we had to climb up, and then it just like turned into this 4-mile hike, and then finally we're at the glacier. And then we had to hike on the glacier, and it was this whole ordeal, but it was incredible. So worth it, and it was my favorite part of the trip.
How did you decide on what you were going to wear?
I actually had a dress that I'd been saving. I collect a lot of stuff. I'm like, I could use this at some point, and I'm kind of a hoarder that way. So I had this one dress that in my mind, of course I'd never seen a glacier, but I was like, I think a glacier would look good with this color. I'm going to bring this just in case. And it ended up being perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That is perfect.
Yeah.
How did you trigger the camera? Because you're really far away.
I know. That was the one part. That was the first learning lesson because that was early on the trip. And I had a very long cord, but I really want to make my own cord at some point because this has come up multiple times where I want to get these bigger spaces with myself and I just can't get the distance. So I'm going to work on that soon, but my friend Jack, he's not a photographer, he's my friend from high school, but I just kind of showed him the ropes really quick of my camera. I had him do some test shots in front of me, and then we just kind of worked together. Like I told him to yell and count down, but we were really far from each other, so it I could still hear him, but it was a little tricky, but he did a great job. It worked out. Wow. I put my faith in Jack.
Plus, you know, you don't have to worry about that with digital because you have infrared triggers and so on.
Yeah,
you know?
I know.
self-timer, I mean, I had, because that was a long cable release.
It was so funny.
Wow.
I literally would like get into a pose and then I would say, go, and then he would count down and it was just like constant communication. Yeah, it was funny.
So let's talk a little bit about your self-portraits, because that is a big thing that you do.
Yeah,
and,
right now.
Artists throughout time, painters, everyone has, photographers done self-portraits. What's your, it's the selfie age we're in and so forth, right, with phones and so on. But what is your drive to do that particular?
That's another thing. Like, this whole trip was something I needed to do. I needed to relax. I needed, for once, because I'd been working since I was 13 to get into college, and then I did college, and then I worked, and it was just non-stop for like most of my life. So I realized I needed to force myself to relax and go on this trip. And like I said earlier, when I was a kid, I remember being really relaxed when I was experimenting. And when I was first experimenting and trying to understand light and trying to work with what I had, like lamps in my house and whatever, I was mainly using myself just because I was teaching myself all of this stuff. And I enjoyed the experience because it also made me understand what a model needs when they're in that position, like being in that space. So when I was thinking about what I wanted from this trip, I had some portraits planned out of people I wanted to photograph that I was going to be meeting up with, but I also decided that I wanted to spend time with myself and just kind of make work alone for a little bit. So yeah, that was like a really good experience that I needed.
Now, when you do them, do you do the same sort of thing? Do you plan them out ahead of time, very methodically?
To a point, but I was trying to relax and not control everything. So I would kind of like pick where I wanted to do it, pick the outfit, and then I would usually, again, like, I only had so much money, so I was only doing like 3 exposures per space and just like doing 3 different poses and see if I like it. And all of them turned out good. There isn't one that I scrapped yet, so I'm feeling pretty happy about that.
Now, you don't use any, do you do all available light? Or do you do, and available, I mean not just a window, beautiful window light like we have here, but I mean lamps, whatever, but you don't bring any kind of professional lighting instruments in?
I didn't bring anything with. That's another thing that I weirdly enjoy, is like seeing what I can do with what I have. It's like a little challenge for me. So most of them were shot outside and those were easy, but then there's one in particular that was difficult. It was when I was in Kansas City at this artist residency. They have a house on a property. It's like kind of a mini farm, they like to call it. They have goats and stuff, but weirdly enough, the house was all overhead lighting, and I was like, they didn't have any lamps. They had one lamp, and I was
ceiling lights.
And I walked all over the house, and I was like so confused because normally I rely on lamps in people's houses. So then I like searched in their basement, and I found these like strip lights that I used, but they weren't enough, and I didn't have enough. So then I found one of those reflectors that you put in your car window.
That'll
and
work.
I put one of those in the room, and then I bounced the light off that, and I had it go towards me, and I had like, it was just like the weirdest setup, but it worked.
Wow.
It was just like finding.
That's a great idea, those car window reflectors.
And they're really cheap too. That's my move when I'm poor. They're really cheap.
Wow, you are so resourceful.
Yeah, it's fun.
Wow.
Like I said, it's a challenge. So.
Yeah. Which picture was that?
That was the one where I draped a bunch of fabrics on the walls, and I'm like on a lounge laying with 2 dogs.
Oh, okay, those dogs.
Yeah,
right. The dog
my
picture.
favorite dogs. I miss them so much.
So tell me about your influences as photographers. I know probably that you go through that in school, right, where they ask you who your favorite photographers are, or who are some of them, or was that?
Yeah, it's hard, like, because in school they do ask that a lot. You're constantly asked to like bring in lists of who you like so we can talk about them. But that was always hard for me because that's not where my photography influence started. I've always looked at films first because I'm more interested in creating characters, and I'm more interested in cinematic lighting. And when I was in high school, one of the things that I did, because I was really aware of the fact that I needed alone time to like process things and to take care of myself. So every day after school I would go home and I would have like this 2-hour gap before my parents came home from work, and I would turn on Turner Classic Movie Channel and I would watch whatever they had on, unless it was a Western, because I don't like Westerns. I've tried it and I don't like them, but I would watch whatever else they had on.
Well, also visually they're kind of formulaic, right?
Yeah, they all look the same. Like you watch one Western and you've seen them all. Maybe someone's gonna get upset with me about that,
yeah, right.
But they have really good movies on there. They're really good at curating their stuff. So I would watch whatever they had on, and then I would pay more attention to the characters and the lighting, and then I would always pick out my favorite hairstyle too. But at the end of it, I would do my hair as my favorite hairstyle. I would do whatever. I can't even talk anymore. Oh my gosh. I would pick my favorite hairstyle from the movie, and then that also helped me figure out how to do hair, which has helped my photos now. And I just slowly like taught myself all these things in high school.
Yeah, you know, when I looked at your work, it's kind of what I thought. I thought your work is kind of cinematic, you know, because they are sets, you know, they're definitely something coming from your imagination. So I guess maybe is it fair to say that some of your early influences were probably more like cinematographers than photographers?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't really look at photographers, and honestly, the first year of school, I started looking at photographers thinking it was something I should be doing. And by sophomore year, I started noticing, nobody else was noticing this, but I was noticing that these things were getting into my subconscious, and without even thinking about it, I was recreating things that I had seen. And I didn't want that to happen anymore. I wanted things to come from myself, so I stopped looking at photographers for a couple years because it was just toxic for my process. Yeah, so I don't really look at photographers anymore.
So are there certain films or the cinematography of certain films or a certain era that influenced you when looking at, you know, when you mentioned Turner, you know, when you see those?
Yeah,
those
a
old
lot
films.
of those are like, I was more interested in the 40s films, like anything 40s and earlier.
So a lot of black and white.
Yeah, a lot of black and white, which is interesting because I don't shoot black and white anymore. But I think I was more interested in the drama and the characters.
And the lighting was very dramatic.
Super dramatic.
Yeah.
I love the drama. I'm actually going to start, that's like my project for when I'm in Minnesota. I'm going to start creating these like 1930s old Hollywood glamour images. I made a couple last winter, but I want to make some more.
But if you do that, then you're going to have to resort to using lighting.
No.
No, you're going to do it.
No.
Because a lot of those films, the light was very hard.
You think,
it was hard light.
But the ones I shot last winter, I usually use clip lamps because they're cheap and you can get a bunch of them. And then I made a bunch of snoots and stuff using foil and whatever, and they do a great job.
Wow.
Yeah. Totally works.
So using hot lamps, and you know everybody's using LEDs now, and so on. So, but you can't. The problem with those is you can't focus those lights.
Yeah.
You can put a snoot on it and you can direct it a little bit, but the hard lights have lenses on them, you know, for a lot of those 40s movies, right? So you're not even tempted to want to try to use lights with a Fresnel lens on it or something to really get those hard shadows and
wish,
stuff.
but it's just like more money, or especially when I'm traveling, it's like you don't have those resources. So I'm just like working with what I have, and it's been fine so far. I'm not like frustrated by it or feeling like I need more. I think it would be fun to use them, but I don't think it's necessary for what I need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're also working in production, you said. You told me before we went on that you know, you're working on music videos, and tell us a little bit about that. What you're getting out of that.
Getting a lot out of it. It's just been fun being able to see like the sets I've made in motion and creating bigger sets. It's you designing it a different way, so that's been a fun challenge for me. But I was also working as a producer and sometimes directing, and like it's something I'm good at because I'm really organized, but it's not something I want to do forever. I like it when I'm working with the right people, but yeah.
Well, you worked on a film that I think you said you worked on a film that got into a big major festival, right?
Yes.
Was that the one with the marshmallows?
Yes, the Marshmallow
Tell us a little about
Room.
that one. That must have been hilarious. So much fun.
We made a marshmallow room with real marshmallows. My hands were so gross after that. I was putting marshmallows onto furniture for 6 hours, and my hands were just coated. It was crazy. But it's directed by my friend Christopher Good, who is someone I've been working with the most just because we get along really well, and it's always a really positive environment, and he's really good to the people he works with. So he's someone I keep going back to because we have a good relationship, and now we're really good friends too. And it's produced by Andrina Byrne, who's another good friend of ours. And we filmed it last fall, and we just submitted it to festivals, and it got into Sundance this year, which is really cool.
Congratulations, that's great.
Yeah, so I did production design for that one. Yeah.
Fabulous. So what's on the horizon for you? You've been doing a lot of work on projects.
Yeah.
But your photography is more or less for yourself has been lately.
Yeah.
So
lately.
Making a move. Yeah.
Yes. I've been trying to hone in on the work I want to make and what I'm trying to do with it, and now I'm at a place where I feel super comfortable with it. Like after my thesis, I was like, yes, this is what I've been trying to do for so long. I just needed the space to be able to create it. And now that I know how to do it and do it efficiently, I feel like I can present that kind of work to clients. And now that I've spent this 6 months to reset and relax and focus on exactly what I want to do, I want to like slowly move out of production. And once I get back from Minnesota this winter, I want to make moves and start just photographing. Yeah.
So do you have a book together that looks similar to a lot of the pictures that we've seen today?
Yeah, some of those, and then I took some other random ones this past year that weren't a part of a series, but each one was its own individual scenario that I wanted to create. So I have a couple of those. Like there's a gold room that I built that I really liked. And there are some other scenarios that are less about the sets and more about the characters, and they're full of, they're just like controlled color palettes for the clothing, but yeah. Yeah,
you talked about the characters. That's pretty interesting. You know, that also seems to go back to cinema.
Yeah.
You know, to thinking of a character that may, in some of your pictures, it might be a fictional character, maybe. Was that fair?
Some of them are fictional. Depends on the situation, but a lot of the hot mama photos were fictional. Ones that I created, and then other ones were other photos. I'm kind of seeking out specific people I meet that I think would be good for the scenario. Like they have their own personalities. Because I do really like meeting people. That's like one of my favorite things. Even when I'm traveling, I'm constantly meeting random people, and I think that's just like such an exciting thing about life.
And so I'm curious, but when you meet somebody, does it something pop into your head that I see this person as a particular character?
Yes. I'm constantly keeping tabs of people in my head of like people I would like to photograph in the future. And I have this like mental database, and eventually like ideas will pop up, and then as soon as I think of an idea, all of a sudden some random person I've met will come into my head and I'll hit them up for it. I don't know how to explain that part, but I do keep tabs on everything.
That is really interesting. And then you track this in your journaling and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you take pictures of people, like if you see them, just to keep the mental image and so on? Is it sort of your database? Or?
No, I just kind of, I guess I just take note of it, because I like experiencing people and just hanging out with people, but I do take note of their character or how they look. Yeah. So
the picture that you're going to be doing later today, what's the character going to be about?
Well, that one will be kind of bringing out my friend Trevor's look. He is someone that I met at SVA, and we've become really good friends, but he's like the guy version of me. He dresses in all 70s clothes, and the first day I saw him in the hall, I was like, who are you? And so I was like, he's my friend's soulmate, and he's just the nicest person. So I've always had this like desire to photograph him, and he knows that.
Oh, you've never photographed him before?
I've photographed him a few times, but it's been a slow process of like every couple months I'll photograph him again. So today there's a look that I've been thinking about for a while because I saw it on Instagram while I was traveling. It was a new look I hadn't seen before, and I was like, wow, that's a good one. So we're going to be taking a portrait of him today, surrounded by his accessories and some trinkets because he collects antiques too. Yeah.
Wow. Cool. And then you're gonna maybe do a self-portrait too in the light here. Yeah.
Yeah, because the light is good.
The light is right. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, Synjihn, it was really great talking to you and learning about your process. It is so cool, and it's so methodical and the whole basis in cinema is really cool. I hope you do. Although I have to say, I do hope you do get to work with some focusing lights, stuff like that. I think you'll have fun with it.
I'll totally have fun with them if I can use them for free.
Yeah, right. Well, and the thing about them is, because so many people are going to LEDs now, you can probably find the old hot lights with lenses considerably cheaper.
Actually,
just kind of like 35mm cameras.
Yeah. Except those are going up now.
Well, now people have rediscovered that there's some great old lenses out there for Hasselblads and so forth. ZEISS lenses, obviously. Schneider, all those great lens brands that people are adapting to fit digital cameras and to fit.
I know, because the glass is better.
Yeah,
it's always going to be better.
Well, anyway, it was really great to meet you and see some of your work. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Yeah, and we'll hope to catch up with you again soon when you get back to New York.
Oh, yes.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. Join us next time for another edition of ZEISS Full Exposure. If you can't watch, you can always catch the audio-only version on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at ZEISS_Full Exposure or on the web at ZEISSFullExposure.com. And to learn more about the latest in ZEISS lenses, head to ZEISS.com.